Good evening, everyone. I'm Ryan Roulette, Artistic Director of Roundhouse Theatre.
Hi, I'm Nikisa Etamad. I'm the Associate Artistic Director of Marin Theatre Company.
And we're thrilled to welcome you tonight to the inside look for The Catastrophist, the new world premiere by Lauren Gunderson that we are co-producing in this new virtual world. First, I want to start by recognizing a number of sponsors who have helped to make this show happen. Bonnie and Alan Hammerschlag, the Venturous Theater Fund of the Tides Foundation, and the Turn Us All Project. Thank you all so very much for helping to make this show happen. The idea of tonight is to give each of you, as our donors and our subscribers to our theaters, the chance to get to know this piece a little bit better. So we're going to have a brief conversation with the creators of the show, and then we're going to offer it up to you to ask any questions. As you're watching, if there's anything that occurs to you that you want to ask, please just put it in the comments section. And while we may not get to all of them, we'll try to get to as many of them as we possibly can. Before we get started tonight, I am thrilled to be able to share with you a preview for the show, a trailer for the show that we actually just finished earlier this afternoon.
I should explain. My wife is a writer. She's writing, I think, this? Just maybe. Every now and then, with a good answer, you get to discover something true. There is, right now, out there, building capacity through the natural trial and error of any evolution, something is evolving right now into something that will be ready for us. Will we be ready for it? Why are you doing this, Lauren? Why this?
So Jason and our filmmaker literally just finished creating that minutes before we joined today. So we're so thrilled to be able to show that to you. Nikisa?
Hello. So now we're ready to introduce you to our esteemed guests for the evening. They'll come on one by one. So I'd like to introduce you to Lauren Gunderson, our playwright. She's been one of the most produced playwrights in America since 2015, topping the list twice, including the 2019-2020 season. Hang on, Lauren, I'm going to brag about you some more. She's a two-time winner of the Steinberg ATCA New Play Award for her plays I and You and The Book of Will. She's the winner of the Lanford Wilson Award and the Otis Guernsey New Voices Award. She's a finalist for the Susan Smith Blackburn Prize and John Gassner Award for Playwriting. Lauren is Marin Theatre Company's playwright in residence through the support of the Mellon Foundation's National Playwright Residency Program since 2016. Welcome, Lauren.
Thanks. Hi, everybody.
And to her right, it is not just a party crasher, it is her husband, Dr. Nathan Wolf. So I'm going to brag about you now, Nathan. Hang on. He's the founder and chair of MetaBiota, which provides a unique data analytics platform for epidemic risk. He's one of the world-renowned virologists in this country. Wolf received his doctorate in immunology and infectious diseases from Harvard in 1998. He's been honored with a Fulbright Fellowship and the NIH Director's Pioneer Award. He's a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader and a National Geographic Emerging Explorer. Wolf has two prominent TED Talks that have garnered 1.7 million views. His critically acclaimed book, The Viral Storm, has been published in 6 languages and was shortlisted in 2012 for the Royal Society's Winton Prize. Here it is, everybody. Go buy it on Amazon. In 2011, he was named as one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine. Thank you for joining us, Nathan.
It's a great pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Then we've got, this is an illustrious group, audience members. Now we have William Demerit, otherwise known as Bill. Bill was born and raised in New York City. He is the actor of The Catastrophist. He holds a BFA from Marymount Manhattan College, during which he was fortunate to study abroad. After graduation, he studied with Win Handman, Sanford Meisner's first assistant. Bill worked as an actor for 9 years in New York City. After his mother received a terminal cancer diagnosis, Bill applied to grad school and got into the Yale MFA program. His classmates include director Liliana Blaine Cruz, recently named resident director at Lincoln Center, 2018 Pulitzer Prize winning playwright Martina Mayo, who also won a play prize with Marin Theater Company, and actress Lupita Nyong'o. Since graduating, Bill's first acting gig was HBO's The Normal Heart with Mark Ruffalo and Julia Roberts. He regularly works in regional theater, receiving his first regional theater role from Sarah Rasmussen at Dallas Theater Center to play Colonel Bradshaw in Sense and Sensibility. It led to work at OSF. He played Will Shakespeare in Shakespeare in Love. He's the second man of color to play the role in regional theater. You can see Bill now on HBO Max in The Flight Attendant with Kaylee Cuoco. He's written a solo show called Origin Story, which received a New York Innovative Theater Award, and he's currently involved in pitching an animated television show. But besides all that, he is playing Nathan in The Catastrophist. Thank you for coming, William.
Hey,
Bill.
thanks for having me. Either is fine.
Bill, William, because I'm reading William, but you're Bill to me. And last but certainly not least is Jason Minadakis, Artistic Director of Marin Theater Company. He is in his 15th season as Artistic Director. He has directed several amazing shows, breaking box office records, winning awards. He has prior to Marin Theater Company, he was the Artistic Director of Actors Express Theater Company, where he directed The Pillow Man, Bug, The Love Song of J. Robert Oppenheimer, etc. As producing artistic director of Cincinnati Shakespeare Festival, he directed Jesus Hopped the A Train, among many other amazing productions, and including 19 productions of Shakespeare. He's one of the directors for Lauren's plays here at Marin Theater Company. And so we're bringing them together again for this amazing commission of Lauren Gunderson's The Catastrophist. Thank you for joining us, Jason.
Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. Good to see you all.
So here we go, Ryan. Should I start the first question?
Yeah, I mean, first I just want to say, as I look at this group, I think a lot of people know I was the producing director at Marin a decade ago. What people may not know is that Lauren and Nathan actually met while Lauren was working on a first project at Marin. Am I right about this, Lauren?
Yeah. I was Jason and Margot at the time brought me out to Marin to develop a play, and during that trip was when we actually met for the first time. So thanks, Marin. Well done.
Oh, well.
So yeah, I just wanted to say hi to all of our friends in the Bay Area, and Nikisa, I'll kick it over to you to start us off tonight.
All right, then. So I think the most burning question for us all tonight is, how did this whole thing start? So Jason and Lauren, would you like to tell us how the commission began? The commission of this play, The Catastrophist.
Absolutely. Lauren, go ahead.
I remember it as a text message from you saying something I'd like to talk to you about. And the question was pretty simple. Would you ever write about Nathan? And the joke with Nathan and I is that we were kind of set up so that I would write about you, but I never did. So, almost 10 years ago.
I regularly tease Lauren, where's my movie? Where's my play?
Now we have an answer, and I can say, you got your play. Leave me alone. But
and we made it a movie right away.
Check. Everything. This is great. But the idea really became, it was kind of an obvious question, and also not obvious to me, but during this time, during that first couple weeks of the lockdown, I had been watching Nathan do his thing, and this kind of amazing mind that specializes in exactly what our country was going through, this pandemic specialist, waking up every day next to him. And truthfully, it started, in January, seeing Nathan. I'm talking about like, I'm here, but, every morning would wake up and I could tell, I've never seen him react to news about an outbreak like this before. And that just, clicked right away. Like, this is different. This is different. The way he's talking about it, who he's talking to, just the worry that was building even then, even made me reach out to some of my friends and say, like, if you all are traveling, maybe don't. This was in, late January, getting texts from me going like, this is, so anyway, it had been on my mind, but when Jason asked that, it felt like, at first, my response was like, no. And then, it started to do its, like any good idea, it kind of starts to show up in your dreams. And, when you're taking a shower, being like, actually, maybe that's not a bad idea. And kind of, it took me a while to figure out how. Like, yes, Nathan's work is amazing. Yes, he's an incredible man. But how do you translate that to a great play? And specifically knowing the constraints that we were under, a one-person play, a play that we can do in a pandemic, a play that we can do safely. So all of that kind of took some thinking, but then I think, thankfully, eventually I responded to Jason to say like, yeah, I can do that. And not only yes, but like, I can't wait to do it. And that was the real difference of going, I could write something, but I wanted to write something great and something really special and something I'd never done before, never seen before.
So Nathan, would you explain to those of us that don't know your work yet a little bit about your backgrounds and particularly the work that you have done for so many years in Cameroon and with your company now on dealing with viruses and pandemics?
Sure. So I studied virology. So my expertise is really understanding viruses, and viruses more specifically of mammals and particularly of primates. My early research was working to understand how it is that pandemics start. So how it is that viruses cross over into people and go from maybe infecting one individual to infecting a small group, and what are the determinants? What are the characteristics of how people live and what kind of viruses they interface with that actually permits pandemics to get started? And so, very quickly, my work was, I'm a field virologist, so I work in the lab, but a lot of my work that I did as a research scientist is actually to go and work with people who have contact with animals through, say, hunting and butchering or keeping pets or in any possible range of different ways, and looking at the viruses in the animals and watching the viruses as they cross over into people. Then my work really evolved into thinking about not only what are the features that permit pandemics to be born, but what are the broad historical outlines of previous pandemics, and how can we understand what the features are of future epidemics, and how could we get to a spot where we're able to anticipate future pandemics and to prepare ourselves to mitigate the risk from these pandemics in such a way that decreases our impact. And that could be decreasing the chance that the pandemic starts, or increasing the speed at which we identify a new virus that's spreading, putting into place steps that decrease the impact of the, not just the health and mortality and morbidity, the fact that these viruses kill people and make them ill, but also, and I think we've seen this very clearly in COVID, the damage to livelihoods, right, which is a really important feature. For me, one of the most interesting things about these viruses is they're not simply biological phenomena. And I don't think I need to explain that. These are social, political, human phenomena. They involve psychology, they involve policy, they involve economy. And so they're sort of a great set of phenomena to think about. And then I think, again, I don't have to say this too much, but we really have a long ways to go in terms of making our societies resilient to these kinds of events. And this is just the beginning of that, right? This is the potential we have now for future pandemics. This is not the last, it won't be the worst. So, if it wakes people up, then that's very important.
I just want to say I am a huge fan of your book. I read it while I was still out in Marin, and I'm going to give another plug to it, because if you haven't read The Viral Storm, you absolutely should. When Jason and I early on talked about this, it was sort of this idea, like Jason had said to me on a call early on when we were still trying to figure out how in the world do you run a theater in the middle of a pandemic. Jason said, I've been thinking a lot about Nathan's book, and I wonder if Lauren would ever write anything. And what's fascinating is what you ended up writing is something so much more than the book. It's about Nathan's entire life and sort of the spiritual and psychological backgrounds to his life's work. Nathan, am I right in understanding that you were not allowed to read or see or hear the play until the first read?
Well, I don't know if it was not allowed. Perhaps it was that, but that actually was what happened. I had really no exposure to it other than the many interviews that we did together. So we did a series of interviews over drinks and dinner for weeks at the beginning of the process. And then there were questions and things like that. But the first exposure I really had to the play was watching the amazing first sort of crack at it with Bill, and it was a profound moment for a number of reasons, as I'm sure you can imagine.
I can only imagine. I mean, it goes into so much of your personal story, and also just so much of your work. I think one of the things that has been fascinating for me in digging into your work and thinking about this play, and I think a lot of people have probably heard this now, but before we move on to other questions, I would love to hear a little bit about the work you were doing for the last couple of years, really trying to convince governments and corporations about the need for pandemic insurance, something that now, in the way that it often happens, now seems to make a lot of sense to us. But I'm guessing at the time that you were out talking to people about it, there maybe was some not necessarily as easy as it would be to sell today, post fact.
That's exactly right. And right, so I mentioned the history of my career, and fortunately, at least for me in my career, is over the last 20 years there has been quite a bit of advances in thinking about pandemics, right? And there's a science to pandemics, and there is a community. It's not a huge community; it's hundreds of scientists. In the future, obviously, it'll be tens of thousands of scientists or more. But over the 20 years or so that I've been working on pandemics, people started doing things, right? So the work on emergence, how these viruses jump from animals, there was a lot of people doing it. And so one of the questions my lab group and my teams have always asked is what's not being done. Mm-hmm. And what we felt was, there was work being done in governments, et cetera, obviously not enough, but there was very little attention paid to the economic, financial, livelihood significance. And what we said is, how could we go about creating increased resilience and mitigation systems to decrease the financial burden that undoubtedly would be a part of future pandemics? And again, you see this if you look at the history, if you study the history of pandemics. The impact of COVID has been unique in many ways, but it's not unique in terms of causing economic damage, right? That is a feature to these. And so one of the ways that we came up with it, was great fun, exploring a totally new realm of finance, which was insurance. And this is sovereign insurance. So we helped to create these really quite elegant mechanisms with colleagues at the African Union, a group called the African Risk Capacity Group, which falls within the African Union, and the World Bank, to actually insure countries right? So what we saw in Ebola was the speed at which, small countries without a tremendous amount of discretionary funding can respond to a few cases. They have to decide, right? A lot of these are just a few cases and they go away. So if you only have X amount of discretionary funding, how do you know to burn it? Which obviously from a global perspective is hugely beneficial, but you also can't blame a small, poor country for, running around every time there's a few cases. And so the idea here is you insure a country with a risk pool, and as soon as there's a few cases, money automatically flows. It flows into preordained contingency plans. And so that's one side of it, addressing finances that may be lacking. But the other is actually to provide insurance, just like corporations have insurance for hurricane and earthquake and post 9/11 terrorism. They didn't have it for pandemic. And so without, pulling your audience into an overly long conversation about insurance, just to state that we were, fortunate to be among the first group, us and some partners in the insurance industry, to actually create a corporate insurance policy for pandemics. And it was a lot of our time was spent trying to convince large corporations that you'll know all the names of the corporations we spoke to, saying you have X number of $100 million of exposure to future pandemics. This is pre-COVID. And well, let's just say it this way. We no longer have to spend that long period of time trying to convince corporations of their exposure.
Thank you.
I have a question. I have some questions for Bill now. So, Bill, you are playing the man we just heard from, Nathan. So I have two questions for you. You can answer whichever first. What are the challenges of playing a scientist in the play? And what is it like playing the husband of the playwright?
So, it's not that playing a scientist per se is a challenge in and of itself, but we were on a bit of an accelerated time frame. So, in an ideal world, I would prefer to have more time to really get truly comfortable with the language and the ideas, so that it's not something I have to think about. And Nathan is he's a genius. He's a brilliant man, and his ideas, while complex, are actually, at least as he explains them, they are graspable. But that said, I have to be able to talk about it on stage as though they're my ideas. So it has to be, I don't want to use stupid acting buzzwords, but it really has to be internalized, So that was like an ongoing challenge. It's different when you get like an audition for some primetime doctor show and you've got 12 hours to say all these words that mean something, maybe. But that's different. That's like surface stuff. This is actually, something that has to be deep. In terms of playing Lauren's husband, that was probably more of a challenge, because, not to plug myself, but having written my own one-man show that was entirely autobiographical, but it's a show that I'm not in, but people are in dialogue with me, where I'm playing people from my life, right? So some people you ask for permission, and then some people you just invite to the show. And one of my best friends said after the show, we're still friends, but we have to have a talk. So part of me was kind of imagining the conversations that Lauren and Nathan were having behind the scenes. And then the other part of me is look, Lauren and I, we've become sort of fast friends in a really weird way, kind of meeting each other in passing at Orient Shakes and then developing a friendship over social media, is normal now, I guess. And then really becoming friends over this terrible shitstorm of last year. And I feel like I have a responsibility to her and to Nathan to truly not be flattering, right? Because flattering isn't necessarily truthful, but to be truthful and not reverent, but maybe just put a little bit more thought into things. not to be careless, not to be precious, because if you're precious, you break stuff and it ends up being bullshit, right? So that was kind of more intimidating. One, you're playing because I played Shakespeare. I played people who have existed, but not someone that is alive now who I can actually call on the phone, and then who is married to someone I care about. So there's a whole minefield of potential things. But then, I've got like Jason as the buffer, right? So if something goes wrong, and nothing really did I know about. I mean, Jason may have a different opinion, but then I can just say, "Oh, Lauren, no, Nathan, it was Jason's fault." But that didn't. Theoretically, I could do that.
It was funny when we went for a socially distant hike when Bill got here, and that's when Nathan and Bill actually got to meet, and we had our boys with us, and they were like, "Who are you meeting?" I was like, "It's Uncle Bill. He's your dad. He's playing your dad. What?" And they were just like, "What?" And we were just like, "It's Bill. It's just your
Bill. It's just Bill." And that was something. It was a conversation that I had to have with Jason, and to some extent Lauren at some point. Is I wasn't sure how Nathan I was being. Like, was I doing a Daniel Day-Lewis? Was I like playing Nathan, or was I doing Nathan the character, right? Which is something that Jason and Lauren and I are going to create together. And it ended up being, right, the latter. Because I only found that out shortly before the hike. So I was thinking, oh God, am I gonna have to like study how he talks and how he walks and all that? Right. But it wasn't that. With apologies to Daniel Day-Lewis, it wasn't that.
Jason, you've known Nathan for a long time now, right? Through Lauren. Yep. Did you ever sometimes think of Nathan while directing Bill and decide to make them alike or different?
No. As a matter of fact, I think the thing that was most important, and Lauren's written this right into the play, was that she didn't put Nathan's. There's not a lot of Nathan. There's not the descriptive stuff that you would expect when someone is writing a character that there are things that you're supposed to hit about them. So interestingly, there are a lot of Nathan's vocal quirks in Bill's performance because of how Lauren actually wrote the language. There are, as you listen to Nathan tonight, or if you watch one of his TED Talks, without really asking Bill to go watch them, there are so many ways that Nathan describes things that Lauren wrote right into the play. And so those things were there. And that was more following the punctuation and following the meaning and following the way Lauren had written it down. But then some of the more magical scenes are not Nathan TED Talk. It's Nathan in personal moments. And we've even discovered this in the actual creation of the film. We shot a lot of the film in similar ways. We were able to go back and shoot them different ways, but we have literally found that the more personal the scene is, the more intimate the shots are that we ended up using. The tighter the framing is, the more Bill gets to bring Bill to the character more. It's not Nathan's emotional journey. It's the character, but it's Bill's emotional life, not necessarily Nathan's emotional life that's coming through. Nathan, the character, for sure, but that's where, reality and art kind of come together. And then the amount that the director of photography has to do with that as well, there's even more, because the rhythms that we are actually finding in the film are neither Nathan's natural rhythms, nor are they Bill's natural rhythms, nor are they Lauren's rhythms in the script. And, I want to encourage everybody. One of the things we're doing on top of everything else is you can actually get the script to actually look at the difference between how Lauren put some things down on the page and how we've edited it. It's not exactly the same thing. And the rhythm of it has been dictated a lot by the editing. But Bill did an amazing job of really finding exactly what Lauren had put on the page, because, you see a lot of Nathan Wolfe in the TED Talk sequences. And when I say the TED Talk sequences, whenever Bill starts delivering the science, we sort of take a TED Talk approach to it in terms of the camera angles that we use and everything. And you hear Nathan Wolfe. I mean, you hear him very clearly. And then it's a little different when it gets personal, which is Nathan's like that as well. There's the Dr. Nathan Wolfe on the TED Talk, and then there's the Dr. Nathan Wolfe that you get to meet when you have dinner with the guy, which is, it's a little different. But yeah, it comes across in the film as well. Bill did a great job, and Lauren did a great job of capturing it on the page as well.
So I want to ask both of you, Lauren and Jason, we've been talking about this. I'm glad you used the word film just now, because we've been talking about it a lot as a play. And this is Bill, what did you call it when we were backstage earlier?
I said we need a hybrid word, like flay or a film or something.
But I mean, it's a playwright and a theater director working on a script that is going to be done in the theater at Marin, but we're filming it. What was this process like for the two of you? We've done a number of film things this year, and I will say the biggest thing that I think we've learned is people tend to look at it and go, oh, obviously you must have known what you were doing because you've done this for years, and it's not that different. I found that it's quite different. Lauren, I know you have written a lot for TV and film, but this you wrote very much as a play, but you knew it was going to be filmed. Jason, am I right in saying, is this the first thing that you've actually made as a film? Curious to hear a little bit about this process from both of your standpoints.
I mean, I will just jump in right away, because one of the conversations that Jason and I had early on was that what was important to me is, if we make something in the times of COVID, which inherently means screens of some sort, how can it feel like theater? So for me, how can we have stage lights and that open space of the box of the blank space of a theater? Partly for me, just because I was so nostalgic and so craving that look. You can kind of just make the smell in your mind of an empty theater. The sound is different than with the mics and the stuff. And so it was important for me to request, and I think Jason got on board right away, how can we make a filmed play, but then not just turn the camera on and walk away and have the actor do the play and then you turn it off. And how can we use film when we need it to amplify these emotions, to go deeper, to find more paint to paint with, to tell the story, but how can it always be theater? So that I think Jason has done a brilliant job. Our whole team. Bill, of course, has experience being filmed, but doing both at once. And all the team at Marin, I think, just really building the boat as you're sailing it. And I could not be more impressed with their creativity and resilience and stick-to-itiveness. It was just, and we ended up with something that I'm so fiercely proud of.
Yeah, it was, when we went into it, we knew that it was going to be a film thing. And I think Lauren did an amazing job of being very aware of that as she was writing the play. I know Bill and I actually said this to each other at some point when we were in the theater, that we are going to have to figure out how to get him back out and to actually give him a chance to do it live on stage, because we fully intended to always do it as a play. Our shooting schedule and everything, the whole idea was that we were going to get in the theater and, we were going to do 3 days of shooting. And on day one, the first thing we were going to do was we were going to run the play top to bottom, and we were going to shoot it with 3 different camera angles. And then we were going to do a bunch of special shots after that. And the second day, we were going to run the whole play top to bottom, and then we were going to do a bunch of special shots. And then we might run it again the third day and do a bunch of special shots. We've never run the play top to bottom. We still don't know what it actually looks like. We're working on it. We're almost there. But, I've seen all the material. I haven't, other than the 2 things we're shooting tomorrow. But I haven't seen everything in order. The last time we did it, Bill was reading it in our board president's studio apartment. And, he was reading the script still. And that's the last time we heard it beginning to end. And the entire process in the theater was literally just moving from shot to shot and from moment to moment. And Bill, we are so incredibly lucky that he ended up being the actor that we had, because the ability that he had to walk the tightrope between a theater performance and a film performance. If we had had a pure theater actor, I don't think the actor would have given us what we needed when Peter had to get up on stage with him and the two camera guys had to be moving around him. It was a purely filmic technique that has no relation to theater whatsoever. And Bill handled it without a pause. And then he was also able to do the monologue. We were able to pull away and we were able to shoot from the back of the house, and he was able to run things as if they were a monologue, and he was able to fill the space so it didn't feel small and tiny. But, if we'd had another actor who wasn't able to just shift on a dime and go from theater performance to film performance, I mean, he was doing it and I wasn't really even asking for it. He was just shifting as we were changing where the cameras were in relation to him. So, I mean, Bill's performance it is what makes the film. And, Peter, our editor, our director of photography, who's also editing the play, the film, has done an amazing job of really understanding what Lauren wrote and of really capturing what Bill gave us on film. And I do think for everyone who gets to see the film, you're going to want to see this live on stage as well, because it's going to be a very different animal. I think as a play, it's going to run about an hour and 30 minutes long, but as a film, I think it's going to be about an hour and 15 minutes, and it's all the same words. It's just the rate at which the cuts happen and the way we move between things in film is so entirely different than how we do these things as a live piece, that for one, I think people are really going to feel like they're seeing a live performance. Peter's done some amazing illusions of proximity. Anyway, I'm rambling, sorry, but both watch the film and then go see it live when we're able to do it again in front of you, and hopefully we'll have Bill doing it in both theaters as well.
I'm thrilled that you're going to do it live later, because I mean, Bill, I have to say, so I was supposed to have gone out to the Bay Area and been there for filming, and then there was a lockdown that was announced like the day before I was supposed to get on the plane, and I said, nope, I'm not going to go. I'll just join on the Zoom. And I have to say, Bill, I'm fascinated with how seemingly easy, you were able to switch in and out of so many different sections. And some of these sections, when you see this, folks, you're going to realize there are sections of this that are filled with a lot of science. Bill, how did you judge even the rhythm of the piece as a whole, given that you were never able to do the whole piece? How did you find a way within those sections to map your journey as an actor and know where you were going? Was that just because of the rehearsal you had done before? How did that work? I'm fascinated.
So, God, there's so many answers. I guess the most direct answer is Lauren and Jason. I feel shitty calling myself a writer when I'm on a call with Lauren Gunderson, but as a writer and as someone that's studied a lot of Shakespeare, I always try to honor what is written and how it's written. And I've been told that I write my emails a lot like how I talk, because they sort of look like stanzas and they're kind of broken up and rambling. And Lauren's laughing. She's like, yeah, you do. So the way something looks on a page for me is very informative, right? That said, it's sometimes hard to stick with that or commit to it when the demons in your brain are like, no, that sounds stupid, don't do it that way. But Jason is a huge theater scholar and has a lot of classical knowledge that he draws on. So he would keep telling me to honor the line and keep comparing it to Shakespeare. So that was a product of how we rehearsed. I don't think I've ever rehearsed. I mean, even if you take the sort of quarantine angle out of it, I've never rehearsed a show the way Jason ran this rehearsal, which was fantastic because, I keep thinking about Allen Iverson and his rant about practice. But we rehearsed it fully committed, like every time, and really interrogating the emotional arc of each beat, moment, and scene, and really trying to find the truth of each moment, because I guess we didn't know, right, that I wouldn't be able to really have that whole journey at any point in time. But rehearsing it that way allowed me to do it in kind of a piecemeal way. And even when I was doubting or floundering, Jason would be like, look, Bill, you found it in rehearsal. That's why we rehearsed this way. Just trust what you did in the room. So that's how I was able to do that.
Well, you did a phenomenal job with it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to remind everybody, if you have questions, to put them in the chat. And since we're, it's funny, I feel like we're just getting started with this conversation, but we're already deep into it. So I'm going to take the first question and I'm going to change it a little bit. We have a question from Elsie that's for Nathan. It says, COVID seems to have jumped to zoo gorillas. Is that common? Nathan, I'm going to change this a little bit and also ask you to tell us a little bit about the ways in which viruses, pandemics in general, also generally starts with the leap from animals into humans.
Sure. So all new pandemics come from animals. And we know some features about what makes it likely for those viruses to be able to successfully spill over. And one of those things is how closely we are related to other species of animals. And so the proximity between humans and other apes like chimpanzees, gorillas, and bonobos does make it very intuitive that, at a point of contact between two species, if there's a very common virus in one or the other, that it would be the most likely place where a human virus would be able to jump. So it's not at all counterintuitive that gorillas could be infected by COVID, and in some ways would be expected. And all of these viruses have their start in animals. Not always, we're reasonably closely related to bats, which is the putative origin for COVID and has been for, other coronaviruses. You don't have to be, perfectly closely related, but the probability increases. And then the probability also increases based on how much contact there is between species, what the kind of intimacy of that contact is. Is there butchering? Is there proximity? Is it a pet living in a home? All of these are features, and also just how much interaction is there between the species that leads to how these viruses emerge.
Thank you.
I think that was an answer to your question.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's perfect. Part of this is that I had a little bit of time this afternoon, and I went back and basically rewatched all of your TED Talks, just because I enjoyed them, and I've watched them before, but I wanted to remind myself. There's one thing in one of your TED Talks that still just blows my mind. Every time I've heard it, it's blown my mind. Every time I've watched it, which is this idea that HIV was in existence, back in the 20s, well before we think, you think now, well before it actually showed up in like the early 80s as, a massive pandemic. That to me blew my mind and started me really spiraling a little bit today, honestly, about the future of pandemics and the fact that this is probably just the beginning for us in a lot of ways. I know that's probably one of the questions that everybody asks, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, is this the big one? What else is out there?
No, this is not the big one. I mean, this is a big one, hugely, hugely impactful. But think of this as like a 1 in, 50 year sort of event on average, something along those lines. But no, the nature of, let me say it this way. When we think of humanity, it's very difficult not to think of billions of people that are interconnected and all this transportation, that's not the majority of our history on this planet as humans, or certainly as primates, right? It was much more divided, much less contact. The particular features of the density of our population, the ways in which we're connected, and the ways that we interface with animal populations through habitat destruction or through other features, just does create a kind of a perfect storm that permits these viruses that are constantly crossing boundaries. That's not a novelty, but to really sort of be able to have this impact. And I am an optimist, and I think that, look, it's remarkable. These mRNA vaccines are quite phenomenal, not only just in how efficacious they've been, but in their capacity to quickly be able to find a genetic, we sequenced this virus within days, right? That would not have been the case even 10 years ago. Being able to plug it into a vaccine construct, and then within a year to be able to have a, profoundly efficacious vaccine. So, look, there's plenty of reasons for hope, and I think that there's no way to ignore this. One day we will ignore it again. Like, think about terrorism, right? If you went back 5 years ago, or certainly like 10 years ago, if I said to you, hey, at some point in the next decade or so, you'll go months without having a big story related to terrorism. You won't read about it in the newspaper. It's just not going to be a big issue. You'd have said, no, that's nuts, right? And so we will slip back. But one thing I will say, that among the things that I really love about the play, one of the things I love the most is, number one, it's not about COVID. And in some ways, it's really not about pandemics, right? Because among the truths that, Lauren's trained me that, truth is an important feature of storytelling, right? And among the things that is very true is sort of the parts of, the character of Nathan reflect my challenges over the years of really just finding viruses deeply fascinating. And obviously the, vast majority of them could care less about humans, right? And even the ones that can infect humans, only a minority of those are harmful. And these are deep features of our world, for reasons that the play, I think, does a good job explaining. It makes sense for, me as a person and the character to end up doing pandemics, but I think the play does a great job of that back and forth of like, yes, it's important to help the world, and this is a feature of viruses that are important, but viruses are much more than that, and microbes are the dominant features of life on Earth. And I think that's one of the things I most love about it, is the non-pandemic features. And by and large, just for the future audience, as a non-theatrical person, I can tell you this is not a COVID play. It's not really a pandemic play. I would say the most interesting features are the character psychology, non-science pieces that the science helps to kind of inform and make true. So anyway, thanks again to all of you. What a great pleasure.
Thank you, Nathan. I'd like to address the one of our audience questions from Judith Oppenheim, talking about the playwriting process, talking about sometimes editing Lauren's words as you develop the performance. I didn't think you were allowed to alter the playwright's actual words. So this is a world premiere play, and Lauren was part of the whole process from beginning to end. It was a strange and unusual process because we were never in the room together rehearsing. We did it all by Zoom, just like this today. On screens, every person was in a little box. Even Bill, with a music stand in the housing he was in, would stand with his script, while Jason was somewhere else in his home with his script. And I would pop in and out as the producer. Ryan would pop in and out as a producer. And Lauren never was at a table with her director and her dramaturg, Martine K. Green Rogers, and our stage manager, who's called our assistant director for the film. We were never at a table together to look at it, to dialogue about it, to try different things in the moment. Everything was done. You have to stop the world and communicate to catch the attention of the person who's in front of a screen and doesn't always hear you talking. Sometimes they have to talk to each other by chatting. It's kind of crazy. And so, Lauren, can you speak to, this is probably the first time you had a process like this, writing a brand new play with your dramaturg in New York, and you are here in San Francisco.
Wow.
And you're working on a Google Doc version of your play. Yeah. Just tell us a little bit about it.
I mean, well, to this point, any new play, any premiere production, we are constantly in conversation about the lines. And there were things that Bill would bring up and Jason would bring up and our dramaturg and our assistant director. And, so there were moments of going, oh, that's such a better way to say that. Let me change the line. So there's a constant give and take. It's very collaborative at this point in the process anyway. But if the play, the 10th production of a play, the script is set, and people are not supposed to mess with my dearly sought after and I think perfected lines. But at this point, I don't know if they're perfect, and the rhythm and the comfortability and the organic performance that Bill brings or could bring to a different version of that same line is more important than I wrote it, so that's the way to do it. So I'm certainly a writer that wants to take what fits best in the company, in this case, the company of one actor, to make it work. And we learned so much. We were just constantly learning, as with any play, but certainly in this, what feels real, what feels right. There was a moment when it was not long before we started filming it that I was like, can I cut 5 pages of this? Do you remember that? and part of what we learned was that was one of the first pieces that I'd written. And that just wasn't what the play was about or needed anymore. And that often happens where some of the early ideas of I'm sketching, I'm thinking, how do I describe this? There was a whole chunk that were like, is this what it's about? This isn't belong here anymore. And then I think all of us were like, when we cut it, it was like, great. Suddenly the play just goes zoom, 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 and gets to this emotional beat a lot quicker and a lot more natural than let's stop and talk about something the playwright would like to discuss. So it's discoveries like that are constantly in process. But what Jason and Peter are doing, and even our composer, Chris Houston, who's writing original music for it, he's discovering new ways of amplifying the words, the performance, and how cut moves, and how, we're still learning what this thing is and how it can be its best self, or one of its best self. Every production of a play is a chance for a play to find a new best self or a different best self. So in this version in particular, but yes, the process was fascinating, bizarre. In some ways, I had a tiny bit of practice because when I had my kids, I had I think of myself as being brave, but I feel like it was brave for a theater writer to say, can I do some of this from, at that point, the wild technology was Skype. But I remember at the Book of Will, the premiere production of the Book of Will, directed by Davis McCallum, I had just given birth. I had a little tiny baby, and I was like, I do not particularly want to bring a 6-week-old baby with me to rehearsal. What good does that do? That's not going to hurt. So can I Skype in for the first couple of weeks? Now I was there for a week, the very first week, but then the latter parts, we learned how to do it. So I had sneaky practice about this before, and my play, The Heath, which Sean Daniels directed in Boston a couple of years ago. I was also managing kids, and I was working in a film studio at the time, and just trying to do all that only really worked in virtual world. So I had some practice with some of this before. It is imperfect, and I would much rather be in the room with everyone as theater wants us to be. But in a pinch, there's ways to make it work, and I think we've proven that with this wild.
So, Lauren, Nathan,
yeah, I'm actually real quick, Ryan. I do want to jump in. I'm going to give you the single best moment from the Zoom rehearsal process when we were all still in multiple different places. And that's Bill was actually, we were working on a scene, and Lauren was, over the watching from wherever she was. And the document we were rehearsing from was a live document. So Bill's rehearsing, and he stopped in the middle of a line, and he's looking down, and we're all kind of waiting to see what's happening. And he's like, So is she changing this line right now because of the way I'm performing it, or like, so that moment of actor insecurity of, is this an edit because of something she's doing? Is it an edit because of the way I'm performing right now? And the immediacy of how we were working was absolutely bonkers. It was just, I mean, I can't even imagine what it was like for Bill seeing the line to change as he was reading it. And just
I
kind of
mean,
being like,
I'll own there's a lot of actor insecurity, but in that moment, I don't know if that's a good example of it. Because if you're doing anything and someone is immediately changing the thing that you're doing, I think it's a reasonable question to be like, why are they doing that right now?
But that's amazing, though. I mean, this is the power, not to like be the like Google advertisement, but Google Docs allows us all to be on the same document, seeing instantaneous changes. So instead of printing new pages and handing them out and discussing them, or like, let's all cross this out and Lauren's going to replace with a new line, I'm like, just refresh your document, refresh your website, and we'll all be caught up. Everything's good. All right, let's keep moving. So,
Lauren, Nathan, I know you have another engagement shortly, so I just want to ask one last question of both of you, if you don't mind. Lauren, you said you think you know your partner of a decade, and then you write a play about him. I'm curious, what did you learn about Nathan writing this play? And Nathan, what did you learn about Lauren in having her write a play about you?
I mean, I will say, the way I approach, I've written about a lot of scientists and a lot of historical figures. It is a funny brain shift to think of one's partner of a decade as a historical figure, but it is not untrue. And you know, what I long for, that whenever I write about, say, Marie Curie or Henrietta Leavitt or any historical figure, I actually usually don't want to write about the thing they're most known for, they're most famous. I'm not writing Marie Curie discovering radioactive properties. I'm not writing about her getting the first or second Nobel. I'm writing about the darker, secret, private, emotional moments that define who they are. And so the task ahead of me was to do that for someone I love so much and someone I'm so proud to be their partner. And we've been through so much. And so it really was finding the bravery of honesty and the bravery of vulnerability, even more so than I've ever done before, which was partly why it took me a while to get started writing it. Even when I know I could write it, it was going to be hard because it's something that is, it's an intimate act to get to know your characters. That's the only way you can really write them. I always think about my characters becoming like really good friends by the time the play is done because I know them so well. So it really was a chance to, I think, as with any writing task, what makes this person lovable, likable, knowable, understandable? The great work of empathy and theater starts with the playwright, being empathetic to their characters and knowing my job is also as a dramatist to put them through the ringer. The reason we write plays is to test our characters, to see what they're capable of, to see what resilience and love looks like. And so to do that with my husband, was a wild thing. And I think it's a long-winded answer, but I think what I learned, as you learn with every character, is just to see through their eyes, to make sense of what made sense to them. Yeah. And I think the fun answer is also to get inside that passion that I know Nathan has for logic, for scientific reason, for the natural world. He's a Darwin. He is a thinker that is kind of unstoppable. He is always thinking. And so writing, tapping into that and being inside of that was fun. It's a roller coaster being in your brain. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Let's see. Lauren is very prolific. And we've been together, I think it's been more than a decade. It's more like 12 years, something like that.
Nice.
So look, one of the things that you learn if you are married to one of the world's most talented playwrights and the world's most prolific playwright is very early on, you'll see pieces of yourself in characters that are written. And you learn very quickly just to not see that because it's not true. It's not helpful. And it's just And I did learn that, and it was very helpful. And so to a certain extent, even though this one I should see myself in, I still apply the same general rules and do see it as a character, and a creation and an extrapolation rather than a kind of a reflection. You know, and I've seen Lauren, I've been with Lauren when she's written even more autobiographical pieces like The Heath, for example, right? So, you know, I want to say that I learned about the way that Lauren lives the characters, and her plays represent an artistic but deeply honest representation of her knowledge of that character based on all this research and all this thing. But I think I already knew that from The Heath and things like that. So, but I think I learned it, you know, I learned it more. And then on a personal level, oddly, there was a bit of almost catharsis or something, because it's very rare, right? Like, yeah, if you're Madame Curie, right? Some scientists will have a play written about them, but this scientist was not going to have a play written about him. But the fact that I did permitted me to bookend a part of my life, a part of my career, in a way that's deeply satisfying, because it does feel, it feels very real, not just moments of it, pretty much the whole thing. It feels like, you know, and very factually accurate. I don't think there's anything in there that was not factually accurate. And by the way, I've only seen it once. I've only seen it once. So.
We should tell them what they thought about the trailer. You were like, "Woo!" in the trailer. That was pretty good.
So yeah, I mean, it's it's a great honor at the end of the day, right?
You and Madame Curie.
Don't.
It's good. It's good company. If you.
I mean, I hadn't even thought about this until just now, but at what point will you let the boys see this? That you don't have to answer that question, but I'm not going to watch it on opening night with you.
Yeah, we have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old who are in it. I mean, they're a big part of it, not, you know, physically, but the mention of them, I think we will. We'll have to watch it at some point. I mean, they're going to be little ding-dongs about it, I'm sure, and be like, this is boring. Which will be a deep compliment to both of us, but
we'll wait for the animated version.
Indeed. And we have time to answer the dance question as well if you want to. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
You kind of answered it already, but
Dan Kaplan had asked, how real did those real moments in the play feel to you, Nathan?
Oh yeah, I mean, again, it is. It feels to me, I think it's an accurate representation, at least from my view, like a character, right? It does not feel, I don't know how this is categorized within theater, but I mean, obviously it's biographical or autobiographical, I guess, but it's an abstracted character in many ways, and the whole circumstance is very theatrical, but, it felt real, and it's a lot of deep emotional stuff in my life, right? That, I think I would not do it credit by explaining it in words, but it was important, very important.
We should also say thank you to Nathan's mom and stepdad, who are, I think, watching. Hi, Carol. Hi, Larry. But because she was a great resource during this as well, when looking at old pictures and talking about your life. And it must be very odd to have a play written about your son and be getting like fact check texts about it. So thank you to his whole family, and certainly holding up the memory of his dad, who's a big part of this as well.
Well, I want to say to all of you, thank you. I mean, Roundhouse, our part in this is supporting the production that you guys are creating, and it's such a beautiful piece that you've made. Lauren, thank you for agreeing to take on Jason's idea and write about your husband. Nathan, thank you for letting Lauren write about you. Jason, thank you for the great idea and for your brilliant direction of this thing. It is beautiful. And Bill, your work in this is gorgeous. I mean, it's truly stunning. I cannot wait for people to be able to see this beautiful show. Nikisa, thank you for hosting. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We look forward to you seeing the show, and we can't wait to hear what you think about it. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Nice to see you.
Thank you.